Why smart people still make stupid decisions. There's a man who spent 15 years studying economics. He knew the math. He understood markets. He could explain exactly why people make irrational financial decisions. And then, in 2008, he lost nearly everything in the stock market crash. Not because he didn't know better, but because knowing and doing are two completely different things. Here's what's fascinating about that story. It's not unusual. It's actually the rule. Some of the most catastrophic decisions in history weren't made by fools. They were made by brilliant people. Surgeons who smoke, therapists who can't manage their own anxiety, financial advisors drowning in personal debt, people who could teach a masterclass on the very mistake they keep making. And if you've ever looked back at a decision you made and thought, "Why did I do that? I knew better," then this video is for you. Because what I'm about to share isn't just about intelligence. It's about something far more interesting, something that lives underneath intelligence. And once you understand it, you'll never look at human behavior or your own decisions the same way again. Part 1. The intelligence trap. We have a cultural obsession with IQ, with credentials, with degrees and titles and test scores, as if intelligence were a shield, something that protects us from bad choices. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Intelligence isn't a defense against bad decisions. Sometimes, it's the weapon we use to make them. Think about this. A highly intelligent person doesn't just make a mistake. They build an entire argument for why the mistake is actually the right move. They construct elaborate justifications. They find supporting evidence. They reframe the situation until the bad decision looks reasonable, even brilliant. Psychologists call this rationalization, but in practice it's something darker. It's the misuse of a sharp mind to protect a flawed choice. There's a term for it: cognitive dissonance. When what we want to do conflicts with what we know we should do, the brain doesn't just sit with that tension, it resolves it. And the most common way it resolves it is by quietly rewriting the story until the decision we've already made seems justified. Smarter people are often better at this rewriting. Their rationalizations are more convincing, more detailed, harder to argue with, especially when arguing with yourself. Think of it like a lawyer. A brilliant lawyer doesn't just present the truth, they present the most compelling version of a truth. And when that lawyer is inside your own head, working on behalf of your desires instead of your values, that's when intelligence becomes the enemy. Have you ever caught yourself building a case for something you already knew was wrong? If so, share that in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people will relate. Part 2. The two systems at war. Here's something most people don't realize. You don't have one mind, you have two. The Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent decades studying this. He called them System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional. It's the part of your brain that reacts before you have time to think. The part that feels fear when you see a spider, or warmth when someone smiles at you. It's ancient, powerful, and operates almost entirely below the level of conscious thought. System 2 is slow, deliberate, logical. It's the part that does math, plans for the future, weighs pros and cons. It's what most of us think of when we say thinking. Now here's the twist. We assume that smart people use System 2 more. But that's not really how it works. System 2 is exhausting. It requires effort, energy, attention. And the brain, even the brilliant brain, is fundamentally lazy. It conserves energy whenever it can. So what happens? Even the smartest people make most of their daily decisions on autopilot, on emotion, on habit, on gut feeling. And System 2 shows up only afterward. Not to make the decision, but to explain it. Imagine a car with a powerful engine, but a very tiny fuel tank. You have all this capability, all this intelligence, but it only runs for short bursts. Most of the time, you're coasting on automatic. And the automatic system doesn't care how smart you are. It runs on feelings, patterns, and past experience. This is why a surgeon who knows the dangers of smoking can still light up after a stressful shift. System 1 wants relief. System 2 knows better. But System 1 acts first, and System 2 rationalizes afterward. Part 3. The emotional override. Now let's go deeper, because there's something even more fundamental happening beneath all of this. Most people believe emotions and intelligence are opposites, that the more emotional you are, the less rational you become. And so the solution, if you want to make better decisions, is to feel less, to be more cold, more calculating, more logical. But neuroscience completely dismantles that idea. There was a patient, studied by the neuroscientist Antonio Damasio, who had suffered damage to a specific region of his brain called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. This area connects logical thinking to emotional feeling. And here's what happened. The man became incapable of making decisions. Not because he couldn't think. He could analyze situations perfectly. He understood all the options. He could walk you through the pros and cons for hours. But he couldn't choose. Without the emotional signal that tells you which option feels right, the analytical mind just spins. Forever. What this means is staggering. Emotions aren't the enemy of good decisions. They're a necessary ingredient. The problem isn't feeling too much. It's which feelings are driving the wheel. When fear is in the driver's seat, you make decisions to avoid loss rather than pursue gain. When pride is driving, you make decisions to protect your ego rather than solve the problem. When anxiety is in control, you avoid making decisions at all, which is itself a decision. Smart people are not immune to emotional driving. They're just better at hiding it, even from themselves. Think back to a time when you made a decision that seemed logical at the time, but looking back, you can see it was really driven by something emotional. Fear, pride, loneliness, the desire to prove something. We've all been there. And recognizing that is the first step to actually changing it. Part 4. What we think we know. Here's where everything gets even more interesting. One of the most dangerous things a smart person can carry is overconfidence. Not arrogance necessarily, just the quiet, deeply embedded belief that because they understand this domain well, they understand that one well too. Psychologists call it the Dunning-Kruger effect in reverse. Most people have heard about the part where people with low knowledge overestimate their competence. But the flip side is just as real. People with high competence in one area often unconsciously assume that competence transfers. A brilliant scientist makes terrible business decisions because business feels like problem solving, and he's good at solving problems. A successful entrepreneur gives bad medical advice because she's used to trusting her instincts, and they've usually been right. An accomplished academic makes poor relationship choices because he spent his whole life in his head, not in his heart. Expertise in one lane doesn't automatically slow you down in others. It can actually make you faster and therefore more reckless. Think about a chess grandmaster sitting down to play poker for the first time. They're intelligent, they're strategic, and that confidence might lead them to bet big in a game they actually don't understand. Their intelligence isn't protecting them. It's accelerating the mistake. This is why some of the most successful people in any field have made catastrophic decisions the moment they stepped outside of it. They didn't become stupid. They just forgot that intelligence is always domain-specific, that knowing a lot about one thing isn't the same as knowing enough about everything. Part 5. The invisible forces. But here's the strange part. It's not even always about individual psychology. Sometimes the most intelligent people make terrible decisions because the environment around them is designed to produce exactly that outcome. We are social creatures, deeply, fundamentally social. And that means we are constantly, often unconsciously, adjusting our thinking to match the thinking of the people around us. Groupthink is the name psychologists give to this. When smart people sit in a room together, all sharing the same assumptions, all incentivized to agree, all worried about standing out, something remarkable and terrible happens. The group's collective intelligence drops below the intelligence of the average individual member. History is full of examples. Brilliant boardrooms that approved disastrous strategies, intelligent governments that made decisions any single informed citizen would have rejected, talented teams that collectively ran straight off a cliff because no one wanted to be the one who said, "Wait, does anyone else think this is wrong?" Combine this with what's called the sunk cost fallacy, the deeply human tendency to keep investing in something just because you've already invested a lot, and you have a recipe for catastrophic decision-making that no IQ test can protect against. The smarter you are, the better you are at finding reasons to continue down the wrong path, at convincing yourself that this time it'll work, at building increasingly sophisticated arguments for why what everyone else calls a mistake is actually a bold contrarian move. If you've ever felt pressure from a group to go along with something you privately doubted, let me know in the comments. Because that experience, that quiet discomfort of knowing something feels off but going along anyway, is one of the most universal and under-talked experiences in human life. Part 6. The Wisdom Gap. So if intelligence isn't enough, what is? This might be the most important idea in this entire video, so stay with me. There is a difference between intelligence and wisdom, and it's not just a matter of degree. They are fundamentally different things. Intelligence is the ability to process information, to see patterns, solve problems, analyze situations. It's fast, it's impressive, and it's extremely useful. Wisdom is something else entirely. Wisdom is the ability to know when and how to apply intelligence, when to think and when to feel, when to act and when to wait, when to trust yourself and when to question yourself, when you're the right person to make a decision and when you need to step back and let someone else lead. Wisdom is not taught in schools. It rarely comes from books. It comes from something far more inconvenient: experience, reflection, and the willingness to be wrong, repeatedly, and to look honestly at why. Most intelligent people are never taught to do this. They're rewarded for being right, for having answers, for being the person in the room who knows things. And so over time, they develop an identity built around correctness, and that identity becomes the very thing that makes them blind to their own errors. A tree that never bends in the wind eventually breaks. The tree that survives the storm isn't the strongest one, it's the one with the deepest roots and the most flexibility. Intelligence gives you roots. Wisdom gives you the bend. Part 7. The Path Forward. Here's the practical truth. Making better decisions isn't about becoming smarter. It's about becoming more honest. With yourself, about yourself. It starts with slowing down. Not every decision, not every moment, but the ones that matter. The ones where the stakes are high and the emotional charge is strong. Those are precisely the moments when System 1 is loudest and System 2 needs the most room to breathe. It continues with a single, deceptively simple habit. Asking yourself who benefits if this decision is right. Is it you that benefits? Or is it your ego, your fear, your desire to avoid an uncomfortable conversation, your need to feel like you made the right choice last time, so you have to double down now? And it deepens with what ancient philosophers called apophenia, the practice of sitting with uncertainty, letting yourself not know, letting the answer be unclear for longer than is comfortable, because the smartest decision is often the one you make after resisting the pressure to decide quickly. The goal isn't to think less, it's to think about how you're thinking, to watch your own mind from a slight distance, to notice when you're building a case instead of seeking the truth, to catch yourself mid-rationalization and ask, is this actually logic, or is this just desire wearing logic's clothing? That question alone, asked honestly and regularly, will do more for the quality of your decisions than any intelligence test, credential, or mental model ever could. Closing. Here's the thing that should stay with you long after this video ends. The smarter you are, the more important it becomes to doubt yourself. Not constantly, not destructively, but regularly and honestly. Because intelligence is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used well or used badly. A scalpel in a surgeon's hands saves a life. The same scalpel in the wrong hands, or the wrong moment, or the wrong context, causes enormous harm. The difference between the people who use their intelligence well and the people who become prisoners of it is this. The first group knows what their mind is capable of. The second group doesn't know what it's doing. The greatest decision makers in the world aren't the ones with the highest IQs. They're the ones who have learned to watch themselves think, to catch the bias before it fires, to feel the emotion before it drives, to pause at the exact moment when acting fast feels most urgent. That is the hardest skill any human being can develop, and it cannot be taught in a classroom. It can only be built, slowly, humbly, through practice and reflection, and the willingness to look your own mistakes in the face and say, I did that, I knew better, and now I understand why. So I want to ask you something. What was the biggest lesson that landed for you in this video? Was it the two systems at war inside your mind? The intelligence trap that causes us to rationalize instead of reflect? The wisdom gap that no degree can fill? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to hear what resonated, because the conversation that happens below these videos is often just as valuable as the video itself. And if this gave you something to think about, if it made you see yourself or someone you know a little differently, share it with someone, like this video, and subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly one purpose: to give you ideas that actually stay with you. I'll see you in the next one.